This is episode 63 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Chris Larsen. Chris is the founder of Principal and the principal of Next Level Income. He's been investing and managing real estate for more than 20 years. He began syndicating deals in 2016 and has been actively involved in over 1 billion of real estate acquisitions. Now it's real estate, car washes, self-storage, and mobile home parks, right? Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks, Jonathan. Great to be here. Love the title too. I remember when I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance back in the day. It's still such a great book.
Yeah, appreciate it. And I mean, part of having great guests like you who have specialties in areas is to help people understand that there is a mindful approach. And the only way to get there is to learn more from people who've been there before you. So speaking of that, when you were younger, did you have an interest of real estate? And then how did you actually start in real estate?
Yeah, so I had an interest when I was younger in racing bicycles. And I'll tell you about my story, and then I'll also tell you, if you're listening today, how to get a free copy of my book, where I really go into kind of all the different areas and how I kind of formulated really what I would call the framework behind, not only my real estate investing, but just my investing strategy in general, Jonathan. And my personal strategy, my personal drive was built on the desire to be able to live life on my own terms. And, when I was younger, I don't know if it was because my father passed away when I was 5. We had enough, but, not a lot.
Yeah.
And I think, that kind of yearning to do things like go on real vacations. We didn't go on a lot of vacations when I was little, if at all. I started racing bicycles, and I just remember the feeling of freedom to be able to leave the neighborhood and ride my bike and, cross this road, ride to my friend's house. And then I was by the time I was 16, I was driving up and down the eastern, coast. I grew up in Maryland. I was driving up and down to go into bike races. It's pretty cool. You don't realize it when you're that young and you're driving all over and racing and doing these things. So, that sense of independence got into me really early. And that passion that I had was for racing bikes. I went to college and I raced until my sophomore year. And actually in between my freshman and sophomore years, I mentioned I lost my father. I lost my best friend at that time. And when I came back to school, I raced the following year, and it was kind of meaningless to me. I won this race and I didn't feel any joy. And I was like, what am I doing? Riding bikes around in a circle. So I went back to school. I said, that's it. I sold everything, sold all my bikes, quit racing. I said, I'm going to live life to the fullest.
Do you think that your experience in the stock market then helped you with real estate? Because what I always say is that real estate versus stocks, real estate's tangible. Like you said, you can fix it up and then it's worth more and you contributed to it. In stocks, like you're saying, you're sitting there, you don't have any control.
Right.
It could go down, it could go up, but you can't directly influence any of that. And then when someone who's in stocks then gets to real estate, it becomes like this, you're in search of this freedom and ability to create something yourself. Real estate does that because it's like you're negotiating prices, which helps you later in appreciation. Was that something that immediately started to make it a little bit more interesting to you?
100%. I think the perspective too, when you realize how volatile it is, and it's sure you can make a lot, but a lot of this is speculation. Unless you're, Warren Buffett and you're literally buying chunks of businesses,
right?
Or Sam Zell, where God rest his soul, but you're taking over, a business or buying a business out. That's different, right? Or you're Gordon Gekko and you're trading on insider information. Where I guess, hey, you know what? I could go and be elected to the House or Senate and trade on insider information. And I wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be illegal.
Yeah,
that's another topic, Jonathan. But
of course.
No, but yes, I like the control. And, I mentioned, kind of talking about how I formulated the framework around investing. And the first thing is I tried to figure out a career to make money. I was reading different books, and one of the books, I believe it was the author of The Millionaire Next Door. And one of his books, he talked about demographics. And it was I started to read about demographics. And Harry S. Dent also wrote about demographics. So I started kind of catching these things where people said, hey, just follow the baby boomers and what they're doing and what they need.
Yeah.
And that's why I got into the medical device industry, because baby boomers, the most affluent, active generation in history, thought, hey, They're going to want to continue to be active. They're going to need surgery. They're going to have surgery, and they're going to continue to go on and be active. So I got into orthopedic sales. And that turned out to be a nice, stable, growing business. And I took the same demographic information, and that's how we got into apartments, because we said, oh, look at the millennials. They're renting in larger numbers than ever before.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is the baby boomers are the fastest growing renter demographic. So I said, okay, I'm going to use demographics as an arrow for what area to go in real estate. And then I'm going to find an area of real estate where I can preserve my capital, because I'd seen my capital go disappear overnight, in the stock market. So number one, preserve capital. Number two, generate income, because I believe that you can't be truly free unless you have passive income. And then number three is, I think it's number, am I keeping up here? Generate appreciation, right? And I really like real estate where you can force appreciation, right? Whether you, so you can negotiate on the front end, but then can you force the appreciation? Can you create value in that specific piece of real estate? And then can you do it in a tax efficient manner? So that's the framework I use when I look at investments. And the neat thing is, it was developed through real estate, Jonathan, but also it can be applied to businesses as well.
Did you find that, is it easier for you though, in the syndications? How are you figuring out which areas you're going to go to? Because obviously you don't stay local for those.
Correct. Yeah. So we're regional, but it's the same. It's the same formula. Okay. So you're right. If you buy in an area that has, and we have like 36 different metrics that we use now, and we focus on typically large growing cities in the Southeast. So if you buy in a city or a metropolitan statistical area, an MSA, that is growing, it has growing population, growing faster than the national average, if it has job growth that's faster than the national average, and you have a favorable business climate where the state is doing things like providing tax incentives for people to move there, whether that's a low state tax or low business tax, those sorts of things. Like those are tailwinds, right? That's the tide that you're riding in. So we look for those sorts of things. Then we layer things on top of that. We look at the demographics within 5 miles, 3 miles, 1 mile. We look at supply and demand and those sorts of things. So those are all very important. But just from an overall perspective, if you have a lot of stuff on your side and you buy at a price that is lower than the market price, or at or lower than the market price, with reasonable debt, so like let's say 50 to 75% loan to value, and your cash flow covers your debt service and more. And so, okay, let's say your plan is to hold it for 5 years, but maybe you sell it in 3 years, maybe you sell it in 7 years, maybe 8 years. Does it really matter? I mean, yes, it matters for the return, but it's hard to lose money in that scenario, or lose a lot of money if you keep and stick to those rules. And again, we focus on the value add strategy, which is buying stabilized assets that then need a little bit of work, need a little bit of capital injection, but are already cash flow positive.
What's an asset class that you think is an opportunity right now where it's a little bit crazy, the market's a little bit nuts?
Senior housing.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I think right now I would call it operating real estate is where there's a lot of opportunity. So you're right. Prices are at record highs, especially for residential properties. I still think like multifamily is a very secure place with high quality properties to put your capital. But look, if you're getting a 50% LTV loan and you're bringing more equity to the table, then necessarily your cash flow is going to be lower because you have higher debt service, and ultimately your returns are going to be lower on the back end. So what's interesting is that same property, a couple of years ago, if you could buy it at a 75% LTV, the returns are going to be say 15%. And, now they might be, low teens or 10%, but it's potentially a safer play, because if it's only 50% leverage and you have decent cash flow, well, that's a solid deal if you have long-term, debt on that property. But how do you create additional cash flow? Like, where do you find cash flow? Where do you find returns? I mentioned like deep value add mobile home parks. Car washes is a space which is, I would call it operating real estate. You have this business, where you can pull different levers, and private equity is getting into it. But I don't think people are looking at senior housing because, I started looking at this market about 5 years ago. Almost pulled the trigger on a couple projects pre-COVID, thank goodness.
That was bad timing.
Hit the brakes on that. Yeah, it was. It's very unfortunate. Look, in that industry, your attrition, or in that asset class, your attrition rate is about 20% a year. So you're losing 20% of your residents annually.
Yeah.
If you're locked down for 2 years and your average occupancy is 95%, well, next thing you know, you turn around and 2 years later, you're at 50-some% occupancy.
Yeah.
In most of these properties. So, there's a lot out there that are struggling. But again, going back to demographics, going back to that original framework, all I do is say, hey, what demographic is about to, where's this demographic about to explode? Baby boomers are retiring 10,000 a day. Well, what's the next? What are they looking for right now? They're looking for independent living communities, which translates into assisted living communities, which translates into memory care and skilled nursing facilities. So, if you have a lot of these communities right now that are struggling, these properties that are struggling, and we have a massive need, a massive shortage that is about to hit us as these baby boomers come upon us, we're going to have an absolute crisis in that space. So if you can foresee that, which I'm telling you how you can foresee that very simply right now, the demand is going to be there. It's not there yet. And the supply is not there. You can solve that problem. And I think you can do very well. The crux is you've got to be with a really good operator because it's not a simple area to operate in. Just like, owning a car wash, it sounds cool. It's like, hey, we can have a lot of cash flow with this business. But if you don't know what you're doing, then you're not going to make money.